Mr. Lendman, thanks so much for being with us. Now, listening into Catherine Ashton's remarks there, when she was asked about the negative impact that this is going to have on countries like Greece, Spain and Italy. Now, these are countries who are relying on Iranian oil and they are facing an economic crisis at home. She didn't rather respond to that question whether it is going to have any impact. She just said that it's going to be reviewed and we're going to see if there's going to be any impact. So what do you think about that?
Well, I think that Greece and Italy will keep importing Iranian oil. I think any other nation that needs Iranian oil will keep importing it. I think the sanctions will fail. Some countries may bow out, and you can't just listen to the diplomatic rhetoric coming out of capitals of various countries. They're very careful about what they say. So publicly, they may suggest that at least they will do their best to obey the sanctions, but privately they have their own interests at heart. They better have their own interest. And imagine the effect on world oil prices if all Iranian oil came off the market. It won't happen. And the key in all this is Washington and the EU and other partners want Iran's nuclear program addressed. Well, neither the IAEA or the assessment of 16 U.S. intelligence agencies finds any evidence whatever of a nuclear weapons development program. Citing Iran's nuclear program is a red herring. The issue is really Iran's independence. So whether or not, if Iran had no nuclear program at all, there would be another reason to target Iran. And I would remind viewers that back during the time of the Shah, I don't remember exactly when it began, but during his tenure, he was encouraged to develop commercial nuclear power. He got in trouble with the West, Washington really, when he wanted to export it to other regional countries. And of course the concern in Washington was, well, that competes with companies like General Electric. Well, we want you to buy your nuclear plants from General Electric, not develop your own and export them. I think the plan will fail.
Well, basically, Ashton just said there that the purpose of these sanctions that have just been agreed upon by European leaders is to put pressure on Iran to, in her own words, enter into talks with the West. Now, a lot of people maybe have been saying that this could be a prelude to some kind of military action on Iran, that this is a dangerous situation for Iran and the West. Do you think this is more about political pressure rather than some kind of prelude to war or something more dangerous and serious?
Well, I worry about war. I honestly do, with Syria and Iran. I don't see it coming right now. And what's going on in the region is the target zone is Syria, not Iran. Iran, there's a lot of rhetoric. You've got the sanctions. You've got the other things that we know are going on. But Syria has got a raging insurgency, externally generated. And the plan, it's a very transparent plan. The idea is to force regime change in Syria, get a Western-oriented regime in charge of the country, de-link the country from Iran, and isolate Iran. It's a lot easier to go after a targeted country if you leave them isolated than if they have allies. I don't know that the plan in Syria will work. Assad rightfully rejected the Arab League proposal over a weekend. I wrote an article this morning, and I called it Arab League arrogance. Indeed, it not only was arrogant, it was lawless. It was lawless. It violated international law, and I stressed that in my article. But I don't know that their plan will work in Syria. And Russia and China are very, very concerned. They absolutely don't want regime change in either country. They don't want violence. But if it happens, they could very well intervene. And I think Washington and the European countries know this. That might make them very hesitant to incite more violence, dare I say, start another war. But anything is possible. Once you get the ball rolling in a direction, there could be unexpected things that make other things happen that maybe you didn't plan. But it's the fallout from what you've already begun. So anything is possible. I worry about this.
Well, speaking of Russia and China, now we know, Mr. Ledman, that these two countries have been opposed to any kind of sanctions on Iran, and they've been calling all the time for dialogue and peaceful initiatives in dealing with Iran's nuclear issue. Now, Russia has right now called these new set of sanctions unilateral sanctions. Now, does that mean that based on international law, in your opinion, these sanctions are not basically legal?
I think they're illegal. I really do. I guess it would be legal to impose reasonable sanctions against a country that really committed some illegal acts. Iran has committed no illegal acts. It is operating legally. It threatens no one. Iran hasn't attacked another country in 200 years, 300 years. Been so long, you got to go back and check the last time Iran was belligerent. It certainly is not belligerent now. There is no regional country that is threatened by Iran, including Israel. Of course, the rhetoric comes mainly from Israel, and then it resonates from Washington. Again, that's another red herring. There's no threat, and there's no illegalities coming from Iran. So to impose these harsh sanctions, to me, they're illegal. They have no justification whatsoever. And China and Russia, and I believe other countries, are very much opposed to them, and I think they will stay opposed. But if it gets any stiffer than sanctions, I think you'll see Russia and China doing more. We know that Russia and China will not let a Security Council resolution pass targeting Syria. If one comes up against Iran, you can betcha they will not let that pass either.
Well, in other remarks that Ms. Ashton was making there, she referred to evidence on Iran's nuclear energy program diverting, so to speak, to a weapons-grade program. Now, Iran has been insisting all the time that its nuclear program is solely for civilian purposes. And right now, of course, we're hearing of news of IAEA inspectors coming to visit Tehran to inspect its nuclear sites. We know, of course, that IAEA inspectors have been supervising, monitoring Iran's nuclear activities, even its uranium enrichment activities. At the same time, Catherine Ashton there speaks about transparency. She's saying that if Iran is more transparent with us, then issues are going to be resolved. Now, what does she mean by Iran being more transparent?
I'm not certain there's another country in the world that has been as transparent with the IAEA as Iran. I mean, just imagine, what if the IAEA ever wanted to monitor Israel's nuclear weapons program, America's nuclear weapons program, in diplomatic language, or maybe not in diplomatic language? Both countries would tell the IAEA to go to hell. I mean, the IAEA wouldn't even ask. And Israel is not a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Neither is Pakistan. Neither is India. They are nuclear outlaws. To my knowledge, well, Israel I know is not monitored. I don't believe Pakistan or India are monitored by the IAEA. Iran is a signature to the NPT. It follows the NPT provisions. America is a signature, and America violates the NPT provisions. So who is the outlaw and who is the law obeyer? I think that's very clear in my mind. My country, America, is the outlaw. Israel is the outlaw, and Iran obeys international laws, yet Iran gets targeted. Well, something else is afoot, and what's afoot is to put in a Western regime instead of an independent one. Washington goes after every nation that has an independent regime. So there's Syria, there's Hezbollah influence in Lebanon, there's Hamas in Gaza, there's Iran, there's Hugo Chavez in Venezuela, there's North Korea, but the real rogue states that really threaten world peace, well, they're the ones that are doing all these things. And the ones that they're targeting threaten no one. threaten no one. It's turning the world upside down. That's what's going on.
Right,
and people
Stephen,
need to
just as the last question, if I may,
about it, because there really is risk.
Yeah.
There really is risk. I hope it doesn't happen, and I don't expect it soon. But there really is risk of an all-out war in the Middle East, and if that happens, that would be a general war, and the possibility that that could get much worse, including with nuclear weapons. We're talking about a possible World War III. I just can't imagine that any sane leaders of nations
let's just
would want to
quickly
risk
get back,
like
Stephen,
that.
to the issue
But there's a lot of deranged people running around. We've got presidential candidates in America, Rick Santorum, Newt Gingrich, even Mitt Romney, saying, if they thought Iran is a threat, they would bomb Iran. Well, of course, this is campaign rhetoric, but they're saying it, and they're daring Obama to sound soft during campaign rhetoric. It's campaign season. They are literally daring Obama not to be as tough on Iran as they are. So but you have to separate the rhetoric from what in fact may happen. Once somebody gets in office, it'll probably be Obama again. The policy that's in place will continue. They may not have said it firmly at this point, but again, I worry. The risks are very high that this could explode into something very, very dangerous.
Stephen, just as the last question, briefly, if you can, for us as well, getting back to the issue of the European sanctions. Now, we know that 1/3 of Greece's total oil imports are coming from Iran, 15% of Spain's, over 12% we've been reporting of Italy's. Now, these round of sanctions, of course, it's increasing pressure on Tehran, and these sanctions now are targeting the central bank of Iran as well, and also even a ban on the sale of gold, diamonds and other precious metals to Iran. How are these sanctions, do you think, going to affect the Iranian economy right now, and how is it going to act in the manner that Ashton was saying, putting pressure on Iran?
Well, the sanctions are biting, but I don't think they're biting as hard as the West would like. There's no question. You impose sanctions against the country, and they have some effect. It would be a lot easier if there were no sanctions. But I don't think they're as effective as the West would like and would say publicly. And I think there are ways for Iran to get around it. The easiest one would be on oil. I expect in Asia, we know what China will do. China said that they absolutely won't impose sanctions. India said the same thing. I think South Korea, I think Japan will keep buying Iranian oil. Whether it'll be the same amount, I don't know, but they need it, and I don't think they will let their own economies go down the drain to obey an insane edict coming out of Washington. The other sanctions have had an effect. As far as the money goes, you can always do transfers to a third country. There are other arrangements too. Oil can be. You can have a sort of barter arrangement. Iranian oil can be bartered for gasoline, for refined products, for other products that Iran needs funds to purchase. So there are all kinds of ways around this, and I think the leaders of your country are very wise about these things. They have been in the target zone for many years. They know the way Washington operates in Israel and the rest of them. They know their rogue policies, and I think they have their responses well crafted, well in place, and I think they'll ride this thing out. I certainly hope so. And the idea for everybody would be, let's stop this thing short of war. I must tell you that as hostile as the U.S. media is to Iran, they generally stop short of saying we have to go to war. And there was an article that I quoted in the article I wrote this morning. Bill Keller, former executive editor of the New York Times, very hostile to Iran, but saying point blank that going to war and bombing Iran, I mean, he just about stopped short of calling this an absolute insane thing to do. Now, that's coming from the most influential newspaper in America, maybe the world, and he's saying that. He may not be the executive editor anymore, but he still has. He's now writing for the New York Times. He has an awful lot of influence, and I think other people are saying the same things. They want to hammer Iran as hard as possible with sanctions, but they're stopping short of war because even they know that a war could be disastrous. It could affect the country doing the targeting as well as the targeted one. So with that kind of talk coming, I think it's a great restraint on actually declaring war or beginning a war with Iran, and hopefully the same sentiment applies to Syria.
Right.
Again, I certainly hope so.
Thank you very much. Stephen Lenman, writer and radio host, joining us there on the line from Chicago with his thoughts.